So continuing on our War of the Worlds series of videos, here we dive deep into the biology of the Martians. And this here won't be just about appearance and how they move, surface level stuff, but instead we will explore their anatomy, how they feed, their organ systems, their communications, their reproduction, and how they might have evolved, their speculative evolution, and their strangely familiar biochemistry, which is similar to Earth life forms, including us humans. So let's get to it. Well, let's begin with how they look. Unlike the little green men of Mars or Marvin the Martian, these aliens from War of the Worlds from the novel are described as creepy octopus-like creatures with huge swollen heads, and they don't have any upper torsos like humans. Their skin is described as being grayish-brown, a little bit shiny, but also damp-looking, which reminds the narrator of the book of wet leather. These Martians have two enormous dark eyes that stare without blinking, like a deathless stare that makes them feel very unsettling. And then below their eyes is a sharp V-shaped beak in place where the mouth is supposed to be. And then around the mouth hang 16 long flexible tentacles, which are grouped in pairs, which twist around and curl like living ropes. These act like hands and also feet. This lets the Martians grab objects, control machines, and move themselves across the terrain. So when you look at them, their body is mostly like a gigantic brain-like head, which tells us of how they evolved to rely more on intelligence than strength. And because they are so dependent on machines like the newest generation of humans right now in 2026, their muscles became so weak and fragile that they were unable to walk properly on Earth. Well, that may be also due to the higher gravity here. See, these Martians are built almost entirely around their enormous brains, which makes them seem more like living heads than normal creatures. Their huge skull-like bodies are round, soft, and heavy, which shows that intelligence became far more important to them than physical strength. It is unknown if they have a skeletal system or even bones. They would or should have some form of endoskeleton, that's for sure, but whether it's bony or cartilage, we do not know. Their muscles are said to have become very weak and fragile due to their evolution and Mars's weak gravity. Inside their strange bodies lies a beating heart and a large pair of lungs that helps them to survive in Earth's atmosphere. But they do not have a stomach or any normal digestive organs at all. No intestines, no pancreas, no liver, no nothing. Instead of eating food, the Martians survive by directly injecting fresh blood from other living creatures into their bodies. On Mars, they use the blood of native humanoid beings, bipedal aliens, while on Earth they capture humans and use them in the same way. This horrifying method of feeding shows how far the Martians evolved away from ordinary feeding methods, and they've begun to focus more on energy-saving methods. And this could also be a form of vampirism. If we take a look at how they sense the world around them, things get even stranger. Well, we already spoke of their eyes that never blink, which means they are always active and always alert, and so they never sleep, and instead they might, like fish species on Earth, enter a state of reduced activity and alertness. But then, aside from the sense of sight, they also have a very unusual hearing organ located on the back of their massive heads. So instead of normal ears like humans, they possess this single tight drum-like membrane called a tympanic membrane. It is stretched flat across the rear of their heads, and it is designed to pick up vibrations and sounds in the thin atmosphere of Mars. However, when the Martians arrive on Earth, this strange ear becomes almost useless because of Earth's air being much thicker and denser than the atmosphere that they evolved in. The heavy air muffles and distorts sounds for them, which makes it difficult for the Martians to hear properly. And when we take a look at how they communicate with each other, well, the narrator never hears them speak in any recognizable language, yet they work together with flawless coordination, operating machinery and carrying out complex tasks and actions without visible discussions or even sounds emitting between them, which leads him to suspect that they communicate through telepathy, silently sharing thoughts directly between their massive brains, like a hive mind. This idea matches their highly evolved intellect-focused anatomy, which suggests that they may have moved beyond ordinary vocal speech altogether. The only sounds associated with them are the strange and unsettling noises that are heard when a Martian feeds on human blood. Which the narrator believes may be simply air being expelled rather than true speech. Other than that, The tripods also emit eerie mechanical cries, the most famous of them being the siren-like alu alu calls heard during the invasion and the repeated ula 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 calls or wails that echo across London after the Martians begin dying from bacterial infection. So they do still communicate through sound in a way, but this would be very unlikely since their tympanic membranes, as we have discussed earlier, are compromised by Earth's dense atmosphere. But how do they make babies? Well, the Martians also propagate their population in a very different way compared to the complex animals on Earth. They do not have males nor females, and they do not form families nor give birth in a normal sense. Instead, they reproduce through a process called budding, where a new young Martian grows slowly on the body of an adult Martian, almost like a branch growing from a tree trunk. When a smaller Martian becomes fully developed, it separates and then lives on its own. On Earth, this kind of reproduction can be seen in simpler organisms like the hydras, certain jellyfish, yeast, and even some sea sponges. A hydra, for example, grows a tiny copy of itself on the side of its body until the new creature breaks away and then survives independently. Some starfish also regrow lost parts and, in certain cases, create entirely new individuals from a single arm. Wells used this strange biological idea to make the Martians feel highly evolved and alien, as though they had moved beyond the need for genders or traditional reproduction altogether. And all of this points to the fact that these aliens may have once descended from a species far more human-like in shape, but millions of years of evolution may have transformed them into creatures built almost entirely around intelligence. Over time, their bodies may have shrunk and simplified, leaving behind enormous brain-filled heads and 2 clusters of 8 long tentacles. Physical strength became less important as technology advanced, causing their muscles and skeletal structure to weaken dramatically. Because Mars has a much lower gravity than Earth, these Martians are able to move more easily in the native environment, like using their tentacles to pull or balance themselves around the ground. On Earth, however, the planet's much stronger gravity leaves them sluggish and nearly helpless outside their machines. Several Martians have even described attempting to stand on their tentacles, suggesting that they do stand in their environment, in their planet Mars, though their frail bodies struggle to support themselves under Earth's heavier conditions. But, however, there are 2 species from Mars. The other one are the bipedal Martians, which are treated as livestock or a lesser class of Martians which were brought as a food source by the main tentacled Martians. These tentacled ones and the weaker bipedal natives of Mars don't necessarily have to be completely separate species. Well, they may be completely separate species, but they might instead be distant evolutionary relatives that split apart a long time ago, much like humans and apes on Earth shared a common ancestor and then diverged on their own paths. Over millions of years in Mars's weak gravity, the Martians' bodies may have shrunk and simplified, the tentacled ones, because they don't need strong limbs, dense bones, nor digestive systems at all, because their brains continued growing larger and larger, and they depended highly on technology. The bipedal Martians, however, may be another branch of the same species, or maybe of the same family tree, a different species, and they may have developed under very different conditions or circumstances, possibly becoming livestock or lower classes shaped through selective breeding or genetic engineering and scientific control by the tentacled ones. Their weak muscles and fragile silica-based skeletons makes them poorly suited for survival, especially under Earth's stronger gravity, and this implies that they may have been maintained as a resource for the ruling caste, the tentacled Martians. This here echoes the same theme of the Morlocks and the Eloi from the same author's H.G. Wells' A Time Machine novella. Also, we can't ignore the unsettling fact that the Martians are able to survive by injecting human blood directly into their bloodstream to their bodies, suggesting that the biological chemistry between humans and Martians may not be radically different. For blood from one species to function as nourishment for another, at least some basic cellular and molecular components would likely have to be compatible. Human blood contains water, iron, proteins, sugars, all types of cells, hormones, countless other organic molecules that support life. The Martians' ability to use it almost immediately implies that their own tissues and cells can process many of the same biochemical substances that humans rely on. If Martian biology were completely different or alien, built on entirely different molecules, solvents, or cellular structures, then human blood would probably be useless or even toxic to their bodies. And so this opens up the possibility that life on Mars and life on Earth may share a distant biological origin point, or at least evolve under surprisingly similar chemical rules. Wells hint several times that the Martians, despite their horrifying appearance, may not be incomprehensibly alien beings, but rather organisms shaped by evolution in ways that humanity could eventually follow itself in the future. Their reliance on blood instead of digestion also suggests that they may have bypassed many other slower biological processes entirely, extracting nutrients directly from the bloodstream for maximum efficiency. In a sense, they have reduced eating to its most basic biological process, which is delivering useful chemicals straight into their bodies without wasting energy. The compatibility between human and Martian blood could also support the idea that the Martians themselves may have evolved from some kind of humanoid ancestors. If the bipedal creatures from Mars that were brought along with the tentacle ones are genetically related to them, and if humans happen to possess similar blood chemistry, then all three species may share a certain broad biological pattern despite millions of years of separate evolution. And this may point to a common origin point, maybe panspermia, which is a theory that life originated from somewhere else in the cosmos and spread everywhere else, which may be true in this case, since Martians from Mars and humans from Earth do share certain biological traits and biological similarities, including blood transfusion being non-fatal, which might also point to the fact that Martians may be closely related to mosquitoes as well. But anyway, they do share a similar biochemistry with Earth's life forms. So despite their incredible technological advancement, they appear almost completely ignorant of disease, decay, and bacteria. It is strongly implied that over countless ages on Mars, their advanced science may have eliminated all dangerous microorganisms from their world. As a result, the Martians arrived on Earth totally unprepared for the billions of microscopic organisms present in this atmosphere, water, and even living creatures, and including the blood of humans. Wells describes the invaders ultimately dying from putrefacitive bacteria, which are bacteria responsible for breaking down organic matter after death. So this shows that they were unable to defend themselves, at the very least, to these invisible life forms. The mighty Martians are defeated not by human weapons or armies, but by the smallest and oldest inhabitants of Earth. Now you might think viruses were there too, but no, not really. Viruses wouldn't have been able to do any damage to the Martians for one and one fact alone, and that is, viruses are highly specific in how they attach to cell membranes and inject their RNA for propagation. That's why we don't get sick from every kind of viruses on Earth. There are only certain types of viruses that can infect us humans, and not to mention Martians from another world. So, fortunately, Wells chose putrefacitive bacteria instead as the ultimate winner, which kinda makes sense in the end. And now with that, we come to the end of this video on the biology, biochemistry, and speculative evolution of the Martians from War of the Worlds, the novel. Now do hit the like button for support, and also click that bell button for regular updates on new uploads. Subscribe to be a part of Legion Nutbug, and till the next time, take care, boys.